One book, one extraordinary life. 48 chapters of saints, science, and the search for God.
I'm Kai,
And I'm Maya.
and this is our take on Autobiography of a Yogi, chapter by chapter.
A man in a garden, surrounded by roses, not praying, not meditating, just talking to plants.
Chapter 38, Luther Burbank, a saint amidst the roses. This is the moment where Yogananda steps into the life of one of America's greatest scientists and discovers something that completely reframes what sainthood even means. Yeah. I remember reading this chapter the first time and being completely disarmed by it.
Right. So Luther Burbank was the plant wizard. You know, the guy whose name became a verb. It's in the dictionary now. To Burbank something means to improve it, to take something and make it better by selecting the good parts and rejecting the bad ones. But when Yogananda meets him in Santa Rosa, California, in his actual garden, the first thing Burbank says is this: the secret of improved plant breeding, apart from scientific knowledge, is love.
Wait, what? That's his opening line? Not something about technique or method or horticultural science?
Nope, love. He's walking with Yogananda through the garden, and they stop near a bed of these edible cacti. Burbank explains, "While I was conducting experiments to make these cacti thornless, I often talked to the plants to create a vibration of love. He would tell them directly, 'You have nothing to fear. You don't need your defensive thorns. I will protect you.' Gradually, the useful plant of the desert emerged in a thornless variety."
So he's saying he literally communicated with them. Hold on, he didn't just breed them through selection. He spoke to them about not needing their thorns, and over time, the thorns disappeared.
That's what he's describing, yeah. And this wasn't theoretical. This was something he'd actually done. The spineless cactus became a real variety, a famous one. He's telling Yogananda about a direct mystical experience dressed up in horticultural language. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's spiritual realization dressed up in scientific language, right?
Yogananda is totally charmed. He asks for some cacti leaves to plant back at Mount Washington. But here's the thing. There's a workman standing nearby about to just strip off some leaves, and Burbank stops him. He says, "I myself will pluck them for the Swami." He's not delegating this. He's doing it personally. There's a blessing in the act itself.
Right. It's ceremonial. And Yogananda plants those 3 leaves back at his home, and they grow to huge estates. You know, the more I read this book, the more I'm realizing that miracles in Yogananda's world aren't about violating the laws of nature. They're about understanding the laws of nature so deeply that you can cooperate with them in ways that seem impossible to people who don't get it.
So Burbank's spineless cactus isn't a miracle in the sense of defying nature. It's a miracle in the sense of working with nature so skillfully that you accelerate a process that would normally take much longer.
Exactly. And Burbank, he's not a spiritual teacher in the traditional sense. He's not renouncing the world or going into monasteries. He's just a man who spent his life listening to plants. And in doing that, he understood something fundamental about how life transforms, how consciousness works through matter.
So what's his resume here? I mean, the spineless cactus is famous, but that's not his only contribution, right?
Oh no, not even close. He created the Burbank potato, which was enormous compared to what people had been growing before. He revolutionized hundreds of crops: tomatoes, corn, squash, cherries, plums, nectarines, berries, and flowers: poppies, lilies, roses. He was obsessed with roses. The entire city of Santa Rosa where he lived grew up around his work. But the thing Yogananda really focuses on is this walnut tree. Burbank shows him a tree that reached full nut production in just 16 years, when nature would have taken 32 years to accomplish the same thing. He'd literally doubled evolution's timeline.
He was accelerating nature, speeding up the process of growth and development.
Yes, and he's very clear about how he did it. Not through force, not through genetic manipulation in some artificial laboratory sense, through the same principle he mentioned at the beginning, through love, through attention, through understanding what the plant needed and creating conditions for it to fulfill its potential faster.
This is such a different model of science than what we usually think of. Not domination of nature, not mastery over nature, but partnership with nature.
Aha, and that's exactly what draws Yogananda to him. Because from Yogananda's perspective, Burbank is doing yoga through plants. He's achieving union, samadhi, with the consciousness in plants. His work is spirituality without any mystical vocabulary attached to it.
Burbank's adopted daughter comes running into the garden with her dog, and Burbank watches her affectionately. He says to Yogananda, "She is my human plant." Then he tells him his philosophy. "I see humanity now as one vast plant, needing for its highest fulfillments only love, the natural blessings of the great outdoors, and intelligent crossing and selection. In the span of my own lifetime, I have observed such wondrous progress in plant evolution that I look forward optimistically to a healthy, happy world as soon as its children are taught the principles of simple and rational living. We must return to nature and nature's God."
He's saying his entire approach to breeding plants applies to human beings too, and crucially, he's addressing education, the education of children. He believes that if you can transform a plant through love and careful selection, you can do the same for a human being. You can cultivate their best qualities, their highest potential.
And then Yogananda tells him about the Ranchi school, his school in India, with outdoor classes and this whole atmosphere of joy and simplicity, kind of a living laboratory for the principles Burbank was talking about.
And Burbank just lights up. Yogananda says his words touch the chord closest to Burbank's heart, which is specifically child education. Burbank becomes very animated. He tells Yogananda, "Schools like yours are the only hope of a future millennium." This is powerful. Here you have one of America's greatest scientists, at the absolute peak of his fame, saying that the kind of education Yogananda is doing in India is the only real hope for the future of humanity.
He goes further. He says, "I am in revolt against the educational systems of our time, severed from nature and stifling of all individuality." That's strong language. He's not critiquing from the sidelines or being diplomatic. He's saying the whole system is broken. It's severed from nature. It kills individuality.
And he tells Yogananda, new types of training are needed, fearless experiments. He says that when you're breeding plants, the most daring trials often succeed in bringing out the best in fruits and flowers. He's saying, why not apply that same fearless experimentation to education? Why not have schools that dare to be different, that aren't afraid to try new approaches?
Educational innovations for children should likewise become more numerous, more courageous. He wants audacity in education. He wants people willing to take risks with how they teach.
Burbank gives Yogananda his book, The Training of the Human Plant, and Yogananda reads it that night, and he's captivated. He's struck by this passage where Burbank talks about plant stubbornness. He says plants are incredibly resistant to change. Some are so persistent that no human power has been able to change them. He writes, "Remember that this plant has preserved its individuality all through the ages. Perhaps it's one which can be traced backwards through eons of time in the very rocks themselves, never having varied to any great extent in all these vast periods." So he's saying plants have been the same for eons. They're practically immovable. Right. He says the human will is a weak thing beside the will of a plant. But see how this whole plant's lifelong stubbornness is broken simply by blending a new life with it, making, by crossing, a complete and powerful change in its life. Then when the break comes, fix it by these generations of patient supervision and selection, and the new plant sets out upon its new way, never again to return to the old. Its tenacious will broken and changed at last.
So through crossing, through hybridization, you can completely transform a plant's nature.
Completely. You break through its resistance by introducing new genetic material. You create a hybrid. And then, through careful selection and patient work over generations, you establish the new form. But here's the key part. Burbank then says, when it comes to so sensitive and pliable a thing as the nature of a child, the problem becomes vastly easier. So he's saying children are actually more changeable than plants. Aha, do you see what he's doing?
Which means the potential for transformation through education is enormous. If you can break the stubbornness of a plant through love and crossing, imagine what you could do with a human being who's naturally more flexible, more responsive to guidance and love.
That's the implication, yeah. And it's radical. It's saying the key to a better world isn't legislation or politics or economic systems. It's education. It's reimagining how we raise children based on these principles: love, natural conditions, careful selection, and development.
Yogananda becomes magnetically drawn to Burbank after this. He visits him again and again. And one morning he arrives at the same time the postman shows up, and the postman literally deposits about 1,000 letters in Burbank's study. 1,000 letters. Horticulturists from all over the world, writing to him about his work, asking questions, seeking his guidance.
And Burbank doesn't seem stressed about it. He just laughs. He says, "Swamiji, your presence is just the excuse I need to get out into the garden." He opens a big desk drawer filled with hundreds of travel folders, photographs and pictures of places all over the world. And he tells Yogananda, "See, this is how I do my traveling. Tied down by my plants and correspondence, I satisfy my desire for foreign lands by a glance now and then at these pictures."
He's so bound to his work, so committed to his plants and his responsibility to respond to all these people, that he doesn't travel physically. But he's not bitter about it. He's found a way to travel in his mind, through imagination.
And he's content. There's no sense that he's sacrificing or suffering. He's made a choice and he's at peace with it. His work is enough for him. That's something the book emphasizes again and again. About realized beings, they're not looking for fulfillment outside. They found it in what they're doing.
Then Burbank shares something personal. He tells Yogananda, "My friend Henry Ford and I both believe in the ancient theory of reincarnation." This is a really interesting detail. You've got two of America's greatest industrial figures, Burbank in agriculture, Ford in manufacturing, and they both believe in past lives.
Right, and Burbank defends the idea. He says, it sheds light on aspects of life otherwise inexplicable. Memory is not a test of truth. Just because man fails to remember his past lives does not prove he never had them. Memory is blank concerning his womb life and infancy too, but he probably passed through them. He's using logic to defend what sounds mystical.
It's a simple argument, but elegant. We don't remember being in the womb or infancy, but we obviously lived through those. So memory can't be the measure of what we've experienced. Seriously, it's one of those arguments that once you hear it, you wonder why more people aren't convinced by it.
And this is important because it shows Burbank's openness to Eastern philosophy, to ideas that would seem exotic or mystical to most Western scientists of his time. He's not just intellectually curious, he's actively engaging with these ideas.
Because Yogananda has also initiated Burbank into Kriya Yoga during an earlier visit. He practices the technique devoutly. After asking thoughtful questions about various aspects of yoga, Burbank remarks slowly, "The East indeed possesses immense hoards of knowledge which the West has scarcely begun to explore."
So Burbank has had a taste of direct experience through the Kriya practice. He's not just reading about spirituality, he's doing the practice. And from that practice, he's come to a deep respect for Eastern knowledge systems.
This is one of the themes of Act 2 of the autobiography, the deepening of Yogananda's teachings, the explanation of Kriya Yoga as a science. And Burbank is proof that this isn't just Indian mysticism. A Western scientist can practice it and find it makes sense.
And then Burbank opens up about something really intimate. He says, intimate communion with nature, who unlocked to him many of her jealously guarded secrets, had given Burbank a boundless spiritual reverence. He tells Yogananda, "Sometimes I feel very close to the infinite power. Then I have been able to heal sick persons around me, as well as many ailing plants." He's shy about it, but he's telling Yogananda that his deep communion with nature has given him healing abilities.
He's experienced genuine mystical capacity. He's healed people.
And he talks about his mother, who was a sincere Christian. He says, "Many times after her death, I have been blessed by her appearance in visions. She has spoken to me." So he's had contact with the other side. He's lived in the mystical realm. He knows it's real from direct experience.
This is the sixth core teaching in the book. All genuine paths lead to the same truth. Burbank was raised Christian. He became a scientist. But through his work with plants, through his Kriya practice, through his communion with nature, he's accessing the same ultimate reality that Yogananda teaches through yoga.
As they drive back to his home with those 1,000 waiting letters, Yogananda asks him something. He says, "Luther, next month I am starting a magazine to present the truth offerings of East and West. Please help me decide on a good name for the journal." They discuss titles for a while, and finally they settle on East-West. It's the perfect name. It represents exactly what these two men are about, the bridging of two worlds, the recognition that truth transcends geography and culture. Burbank writes an article for the first issue called Science and Civilization, and as their friendship deepens, Yogananda starts calling him his American saint. He quotes from the Gospel of John, "Behold, a man in whom there is no guile." He's saying, here's someone without deception, without pretense, without hidden agendas.
And Yogananda describes his heart as fathomlessly deep, long acquainted with humility, patience, sacrifice. His little home amidst the roses is austere and simple. He understood the worthlessness of luxury, the joy of few possessions. His modesty impressed Yogananda over and over.
Yogananda makes this beautiful observation. The modesty with which he wore his scientific fame repeatedly reminded me of the trees that bend low with the burden of ripening fruits. It is the barren tree that lifts its head high in an empty boast.
The trees that bear the most fruit bow lowest from the weight of their own abundance. That's Burbank. That's true humility in the face of genuine achievement. But then the mood shifts. Yogananda is in New York when in 1926 his dear friend passes away. Yogananda writes, "In tears I thought, oh, I would gladly walk all the way from here to Santa Rosa for one more glimpse of him. The grief is real.
The connection between these two men was deep.
He locked himself away from everyone for 24 hours. No secretaries, no visitors, just silence.
The next day, Yogananda conducts a Vedic memorial rite. He gathers a group of American students, and they dress in Hindu ceremonial clothes. They chant ancient hymns. They make an offering of flowers, water, and fire, symbols of the bodily elements and their release in the infinite source. It's a beautiful way to honor Burbank's life.
And then Yogananda writes something that's just luminous. Though the form of Burbank lies in Santa Rosa under a Lebanon cedar that he planted years ago in his garden, his soul is enshrined for me in every wide-eyed flower that blooms by the wayside. Withdrawn for a time into the spacious spirit of nature, is that not Luther whispering in her winds, walking her dawns? He's saying Burbank is still alive, not in some abstract sense, but literally in the plants, in the flowers, in nature itself. The man who spent his whole life in communion with plants has dissolved back into that communion. And here's what gets me. Burbank's name has literally become part of common language. Webster's New International Dictionary now defines Burbank as a transitive verb, to cross or graft a plant, hence figuratively, to improve anything as a process or institution, by selecting good features and rejecting bad, or by adding good features. His name is now a synonym for improvement, for refinement, for love applied to growth. His name means goodness. Yogananda reads that definition and cries out, "Beloved Burbank, your very name is now a synonym for goodness." Think about that. That's the kind of legacy most people dream of but never achieve. Not fame, not fortune, but to have your name become synonymous with goodness itself.
You know, the teaching here is so clear and yet so easy to miss. Burbank wasn't enlightened in the conventional sense. He wasn't a yogi meditating for hours every day. He wasn't renouncing the world or living in a cave or wearing robes. He was a scientist, a grower, a man who loved plants. But because he loved them, because he listened to them, because he treated them as beings worthy of respect and communion, he accessed something sacred.
He demonstrated that sainthood doesn't have to look like anything in particular. A saint amidst the roses looks like a man talking to cacti. It looks like someone patient enough to spend 30 years breeding walnut trees. It looks like humility worn like old fabric. It looks like showing up to your work every day with love.
And the teaching about education is still so relevant today. He was saying in the 1920s what we're still struggling to accept now, that education should be fearless, experimental, rooted in nature, centered on love and transformation, not conformity and obedience.
And crucially, that the person doing the educating has to embody what Burbank embodied: patience, love, willingness to experiment, understanding that change takes time, that you can't force a human being to become something they're not, but you can create the conditions for them to flourish.
The 6 core teachings are all here. Consciousness is fundamental. The consciousness in plants that Burbank honored and communicated with. Samadhi as union with that consciousness. Karma as education. His whole approach to breeding was understanding what the plant needed and creating conditions for it to fulfill its potential faster. And all genuine paths lead to the same truth. Burbank was a Christian by upbringing, a scientist by training, but he found the same God through plants that Yogananda found through meditation and Kriya Yoga. There's also this implicit teaching about presence. Burbank wasn't distracted by his 1,000 letters. When Yogananda came, he put everything aside. Your presence is just the excuse I need to get out into the garden. He was fully there. He was present with his guest.
And that presence, that willingness to be in communion with another being, whether it's a plant, a person, or a friend, that's where the real work happens. Not in doing more, not in striving harder, but in being present to what's already there.
The next chapter is Therese Newman, the stigmatist, another kind of saint, another testimony that the sacred appears in forms we don't expect.
See you next time
for the next chapter of Autobiography of a Yogi.